1. Let me tell you about this absolutely stunning 1968 Chevy C10 I just came across on Craigslist. I've got to say, this is one of those builds that makes you stop and stare. This C10 has gone through a serious frame-off restoration, and you can tell no expense was spared. We're looking at an original Arizona truck, which is already a huge plus because that typically means minimal rust issues. The seller's being straight up here. This thing is immaculate with laser-straight body panels and a 10/10ths paint job in white, complemented by custom hand-painted pinstriping. Under the hood, you've got a rebuilt 350 small block paired with a freshly redone TH350 automatic transmission. The drivetrain is completed with a 12-bolt rear end featuring a new Eaton TrueTrack differential. That's some serious quality right there. They've upgraded to disc brakes and added power steering and brakes for modern drivability. The attention to detail is incredible. The frame and body were media blasted down to bare metal before restoration, and they've added a practical spray-in bed liner. Those Boyd Coddington wheels with fresh rubber really set off the whole look. With less than 5,000 miles on the build, this truck is basically just broken in. At $29,500, considering today's classic truck market and the quality of this restoration, it's actually priced pretty reasonably for what you're getting. This isn't just a restored truck, it's a show-quality piece that you can actually drive and enjoy. 2. Let's talk about this interesting 1978 Ford Ranchero I found on Craigslist. You know, these car-truck hybrids have a special place in automotive history, and this one's got some stories to tell. At $9,500, we're looking at a pretty honest example with the mighty 400 CI Cleveland V8 under the hood, showing just 56,100 miles. That's impressively low mileage for a vehicle of this age. The seller's being upfront about the condition, which I really appreciate. They're not trying to hide anything here. The good stuff first. It's got a solid straight body, and the frame is in excellent shape, which is crucial for these vehicles. They've taken care of the essentials with new tires and brakes installed last year. The Cleveland V8 is a strong engine choice, and this one's reportedly running and driving well. Now let's talk about the issues, because you need to know what you're getting into. There's a power steering leak that needs attention. Not a deal breaker, but something to factor into your budget. Also, there's some floor pan rust behind the seats, which is pretty common for these cars, but definitely needs addressing before it gets worse. For the price point, you're getting a fairly original Ranchero that's not perfect but has good bones. This isn't a show car, but it's a solid driver that could be gradually improved while you enjoy it. Just make sure to check those floor pans thoroughly and factor in repair costs for the power steering leak. 3. Let me tell you about this sweet 1968 Chevy C20 I found on Craigslist. You know, finding original, well-maintained C20s is getting tougher these days, so this one caught my attention. At $22,500, we're looking at a two-owner truck with its original 327 V8 and turbo 400 transmission. That's pretty rare these days. The odometer shows 116,000 miles, and while that might seem high to some, for a 55-year-old workhorse, that's actually quite reasonable. Plus, the seller's being transparent about the odometer rollover. What really stands out here is the maintenance record. The entire brake system has been rebuilt from the booster to the wheel cylinders. That's a proper job right there. They've also installed a new dual exhaust system, new shocks, and fresh U-joints with a carrier bearing. Those Michelin LT 285/75/16 tires only have about 8,000 miles on them, which is a nice bonus. The truck's had one repaint in its original red color, and it's still rocking its factory build sheet. That's gold for authenticity buffs. It's particularly cool that it still has its original spare tire and factory jack. These little details matter to collectors. For $22,500, you're getting a piece of American truck history that's been properly maintained rather than just prettied up for sale. These C20s were built to work, and this one seems ready to keep doing just that while still turning heads at your local cars and coffee meet. 4. Let's talk about this 1982 Chevy C10 short bed I spotted on Craigslist. You know, these square-body Chevys are really heating up in the market, and this one's got some interesting features to discuss. Listed at $19,500, we're looking at an original short bed C10 with documented history. It's pretty cool that it still has all its paperwork from when it was first sold at Adams Chevrolet in Norman, Oklahoma. That kind of documentation is getting rare these days. Under the hood, you've got a rebuilt 350 V8 paired with an automatic transmission. The AC has been converted to R134, which is a practical upgrade that'll keep you cool in modern times. The odometer shows 116,000 miles, which isn't bad for a 41-year-old truck. The sellers kept it pretty original with those classic rally wheels wrapped in Michelin tires, and they mention the interior is super clean. The tilt steering column is a nice comfort feature that not all of these trucks came with. Now I've got to be straight with you. At $19,500, this is sitting at the higher end of the market for an AS 82 C10. While square bodies are definitely climbing in value, you'll want to inspect this one thoroughly. The seller's description is a bit brief, and we don't get much detail about the condition of the body, undercarriage, or when that 350 was rebuilt. 5. Let me tell you about this sweet 1976 Chevy K10. I found on Craigslist. You know how hard it is to find these square-body 4x4s that aren't completely worn out or rusted away? Well, this one's special because it spent its entire life in Arizona. Priced at $19,500, we're looking at what appears to be a really well-maintained K10. The seller's done their homework with maintenance. They've basically gone through this truck from top to bottom. Let me break down why this one's interesting. First off, it's got the classic 350 V8 with a newer carb, paired with that bulletproof 3-speed manual transmission with the granny gear, perfect for off-road crawling or heavy hauling. The dual gas tanks are a great factory feature that gives you some serious range. What really catches my attention is all the recent work. New door rubber, fresh cab bushings, updated AC system with new ductwork and compressor, and it actually works. They say it'll freeze you out. New exhaust, fresh tires and rims. They've also done complete fluid changes in everything. Radiator, both axles, brakes, transmission, and transfer case. That's the kind of maintenance you want to see. The seller's absolutely right about one thing. These are simple, computer-free trucks that can run basically forever with proper maintenance. At $19,500, considering the current market for square-body Chevys and all the recent work done, it's actually priced pretty fairly. Plus, you're getting a truck that's ready to work or play right now, but still leaves room for your own touches if you want to take it further. 6. Let's talk about this 1977 Chevy Silverado I just found on Craigslist. You know, these square-body Chevys are really hot right now, and this one's got some interesting features to discuss. At $15,000, we're looking at a 4x4 with only 44,000 miles on the clock. If those miles are accurate, that's impressively low for a truck of this age. The sellers kept the description pretty brief, but there are some key points worth noting. Under the hood, you've got a small block Chevy with some nice performance upgrades. Headers, a cam, and Edelbrock accessories. That combination should give this truck some decent power over stock. It's paired with a manual transmission, which is always fun in these old trucks. The seller claims there's no rust, and they've recently given it a fresh paint job in white, plus they've undercoated it. That's good for preservation, though I'd still recommend checking all the usual rust spots carefully. These trucks are known for hidden surprises. Now, I've got to be honest here. The description is pretty sparse for a $15,000 truck. We don't know much about the truck's history, when the modifications were done, or the condition of crucial components like the transfer case, axles, or interior. The fresh paint and undercoating are nice, but you'll definitely want to inspect everything thoroughly in person. 7. Let's talk about this 1984 Dodge Ram Charger I found on Craigslist. You know, these old-school SUVs are getting harder to find, especially in decent shape. Listed at $8,300, this Ram Charger shows 66,000 miles, and the seller claims it's in excellent condition. Now, I've got to be straight with you. The description is pretty minimal for a nearly 40-year-old vehicle, so you'll definitely want to see this one in person. The good news is they've done some important updates. New brakes, interior work, fresh battery and alternator, and new shocks. The AC is said to work great, which is always a bonus in these older rigs. The 4x4 system is present, though we don't get any details about its condition or when it was last serviced. While the seller doesn't specify, these typically came with the robust 318 V8 or the bigger 360 paired with an automatic transmission. They were solid power plants that could take a beating and keep on ticking. At $8,300, and they're open to offers, the price isn't outrageous in today's market for classic SUVs, but you'll want to do your homework. Check for the usual Ram Charger trouble spots, rust around the removable top, frame condition, and make sure that 4x4 system engages properly. Also verify that mileage if possible. 66K seems pretty low for a vehicle this age. 8. I've got to be really honest with you about this 1952 Chevy 3100 listing I found on Craigslist, because there are some red flags we need to discuss. First off, the $30,000 asking price is in the ballpark for a well-restored 3100. But the seller's description is worryingly vague. Just saying, classic restored everything good, doesn't tell us much about what was actually done. Also, there's a clear error in the listing where it states FWD, front-wheel drive. These trucks were definitely rear-wheel drive, so that's either a typo or shows a concerning lack of knowledge about the vehicle. The truck is said to have 150,000 miles with an odometer rollover, which isn't unusual for a 71-year-old vehicle. It's running the original inline-six engine with a manual transmission, painted in green, which could be a beautiful combination if done right. But here's where I need to be straight with you. For $30,000, we need way more information. What kind of restoration was done? When was it completed? Was it frame-off or just cosmetic? What parts were replaced or rebuilt? The lack of detail is concerning at this price point. While these 52 Chevy 3100S are absolutely gorgeous trucks when properly restored, and they're climbing in value, you'd want to see extensive documentation of the restoration work at this price point. Make sure to get a detailed inspection and ask for any restoration photos or documentation before considering this one. 9. Let's talk about this 1960 Ford Ranchero that just popped up on Craigslist. You know, these first-gen Falcon-based Rancheros are pretty special. They're the perfect blend of classic car style with pickup practicality. Listed at $15,000, this one's particularly interesting because it's a two-owner vehicle, which is pretty remarkable for a 63-year-old car. It's powered by Ford's reliable straight-six engine paired with an automatic transmission, and showing 83,000 miles on the odometer. Now I've got to be straight with you. The seller's description is pretty minimal for a vehicle of this age and asking price. While they say it's in very good condition and runs great, we're not getting much detail about its history, any restoration work, or the condition of crucial components. The fact that it's been garaged is definitely a plus though. The red paint looks good in the listing, and being a Falcon-based Ranchero means you get car-like handling with pickup utility. These vehicles are becoming increasingly collectible, especially since they're getting harder to find in decent condition. At $15,000, you're in the middle range for these cars. Not project car pricing, but not fully restored pricing either. You'll definitely want to inspect this one thoroughly in person. Check for the usual rust spots in the bed, floor pans, and lower body panels, and make sure all the unique Ranchero-specific trim pieces are present and accounted for. 10. Let's talk about this 1985 Ford F250 I found on Craigslist. I've got to be upfront here. This one's got some interesting aspects, but also some red flags we need to discuss. Listed at $6,000, we're looking at a 4x4 diesel with the 6.9L IDI engine and C6 automatic transmission. The odometer shows 157,000 miles, which isn't terrible for these old diesels. They're known to go much further when maintained properly. The Banks Turbo Edition is a nice upgrade that helps wake up these naturally aspirated IDI engines. Now here's where we need to be real. This truck has a salvage title, and the seller lists the condition as fair. That's honest of them, but it means you need to do some serious investigating before pulling the trigger. We don't get any information about why it has a salvage title or what kind of damage it may have had. The Twin Traction Beam, TTB, 4x4 system is present, but we don't get any info about its condition. These systems can be prone to wear and alignment issues, so you'll want to check that carefully. On the plus side, it's smog exempt, and the registration is current, which means you won't have immediate headaches in that department. Being AS85, it's from the era when these trucks were built tough, but still relatively simple to work on. At $6,000, considering the salvage title and fair condition, you'll want to approach this one carefully. These old IDI diesels are getting harder to find, especially with 4x4, and the Banks Turbo is a valuable addition. However, make sure to get a thorough inspection, find out the salvage title story, and check all the usual rust spots and mechanical systems before making a decision. 11. Let me tell you about this interesting 1972 Chevy C10 stepside I found on Craigslist. You know, finding original short bed stepsides is getting tougher these days, especially one-owner survivors like this one. At $7,250, we're looking at a pretty honest truck with some cool features. It's a California truck from Ventura, which originally came with a V8 and a column shift 3-speed, though it's now sporting a Hurst floor shifter. That's actually a nice upgrade for a more engaging driving experience. Now, let's be completely transparent here. This truck needs some love. The seller's being upfront about the rust issues on one side, affecting the fender, cab, and door. There's also an immediate mechanical need. It's missing an alternator bracket, which isn't a huge deal but needs to be addressed. What makes this interesting is its configuration: V8, short bed, step-side body style. These are becoming increasingly desirable, and finding one that's still running and driving, with its original character intact, is getting rare. Being a one-owner California truck adds some provenance to the story. For the asking price of $7,250, you're getting a project, but one with good bones and potential. You could either restore it to its former glory or embrace the patina look that's so popular right now. The seller mentions they're downsizing their collection to buy a home, which explains the motivated pricing. 12. Let me tell you about this seriously impressive 1973 Chevy 3500 one-ton that just popped up on Craigslist. This isn't your average old work truck. Someone's put some serious thought and money into this build. Listed at $21,000, we're looking at a truck with the mighty 454 big block, paired with a T700 transmission and a Dana 60 full floater rear end. That's some heavy-duty running gear right there. The odometer shows 53,000 miles, though on a truck this old you'll want to verify that. What really catches my attention is the extensive list of new components. They've upgraded to four-wheel disc brakes, a huge improvement over the original drums. The cooling system's been modernized with electric fans, and the fuel system's gotten a complete overhaul with a Holley electric pump, new lines, filters, and sending units. That Holley 750 double pumper and MSD distributor should wake up that big block nicely. The truck's got some cool custom touches too. Power windows, dual tanks that have been cleaned and sealed, a louvered hood, and a pre-runner style front and rear setup. Those new 285/70R17 Cooper Discoverer ATs give it a proper stance. At $21,000, we're in serious money territory for a 73 truck, but look at the list of upgrades and new parts. Someone spent some real time and money here. This isn't just a preserved classic. It's been thoughtfully upgraded to be more usable and reliable while keeping that classic look. 13. Let's talk about this interesting 1977 Dodge W200 I found on Craigslist. This isn't your average old Dodge. We're looking at an ex-military truck, which adds a pretty cool dimension to its history. At $4,500, and they're open to offers or trades, this W200 comes with some interesting credentials. It's got the V8 engine paired with an automatic transmission, and importantly, the seller notes that the 4x4 system is actually working. That's always good news on an old 4x4. The odometer shows 156,189 miles with a rollover, which isn't surprising for a 46-year-old workhorse. What really catches my attention here is that the seller has invested over $2,200 in recent repairs and has the receipts to prove it. That's always good to see because it shows they're being transparent and have actually put money into keeping it running. The military heritage is verified through the VIN plate, which adds some interesting provenance to this truck. Now, I've got to be honest. At this price point, you're not getting a show truck. These old Dodges are tough as nails, but they're pretty basic machines. The green paint is likely not going to win any beauty contests, but that's part of the charm with these military vehicles. For $4,500, you're getting a piece of military history that's actually usable. These W200S were built to work, and with the recent repairs, this one seems ready to keep doing just that. It could make a great work truck, weekend warrior, or even an interesting restoration project if you want to preserve its military heritage. 14. Let me tell you about this seriously well-documented 1969 Chevy C10 I found on Craigslist. This isn't just any C10. This is a family-owned truck with some impressive history and recent upgrades. Listed at $28,000, we're looking at a long bed fleet side that came from its original owner and has been in the same family for over 20 years. What really stands out here is the recent mechanical work. It's sporting a fresh Jasper 350 long block with 4-bolt mains, only 1,000 miles on it, and a rebuilt automatic transmission with just 2,000 miles. The upgrades list is extensive and thoughtful. MSD ignition, power steering and brakes, 72 front disc brake conversion, heavy-duty radiator, and dealer-installed AC. They've added a new Edelbrock 4-barrel carb with K and N filter, and the exhaust has been upgraded with Flowmaster tips. The fuel system includes a new cab tank, though the dual saddle tanks would need inspection before use. The stance is dialed in with a 2 inches front/4 rear lowering kit from Speedway Motors, sitting on 15 inches Eagle alloys with fresh Goodyear rubber. The exterior gets some nice touches with a chrome billet grille, NOS, 72 front bumper, and custom diamond plate bed protection. Inside, you've got a reupholstered bench seat, 3-point harnesses, modern JVC Bluetooth stereo, and some nice touches like the Grant steering wheel. The documentation is impressive. Original manuals, dealer information binder, print ads, and maintenance records. 15. Let's talk about this 1969 Chevy C10 CST I found on Craigslist. This one's got some interesting features, but also some things we need to be honest about. Listed at $10,000, we're looking at a CST model, custom sport truck, which is a desirable trim level, painted in yellow with a white top. The big draw here is that 396 V8 engine, which the seller claims is original from the factory. If true, that's a valuable piece of this truck's history, as these big block C10s are getting harder to find. Now let's be straight here, the seller's being upfront about rust in the typical areas. On these C10s, that usually means cab corners, rocker panels, and potentially floor pans. You'll definitely want to inspect these areas carefully because rust repair can get expensive quickly. The truck's got some nice features: power steering, power brakes, custom exhaust, and they've done some interior work including headliner and door panels. The bench seats are said to be nice, and it comes with a toolbox. They mention thousands spent in parts and labor, though we don't get specifics about what was done or when. For $10,000, you're getting a CST model with a desirable big block engine, but also some rust issues to address. This price point seems fair if the 396 is truly numbers matching and running well, but make sure to inspect those rust areas thoroughly before making a decision. These trucks are climbing in value, but rust repair can quickly exceed the purchase price if you're not careful. 16. Let's talk about this 1975 Chevy Silverado C20 Camper Special I found on Craigslist. We need to be real about what we're looking at here. Listed at $6,500, this is a 3/4-ton C20 with some interesting features. Being a camper special means it came with heavier-duty suspension components to handle camper loads. The odometer shows 5,000 miles, but on a truck this age, that's likely after a rollover or the odometer's stopped working. You'll want to verify the actual mileage. Now here's what you need to know. This truck is currently on non-op status, which means it's not currently registered for road use. The good news is there are no back fees to worry about, and being smog exempt, thanks to its age, is a plus in states with strict emissions laws. The seller mentions it runs good and has a clean interior, which is promising. One notable feature is that heavy-duty bumper with a 9,000 pound winch. That's a useful addition for a work truck. At $6,500, you're in project truck territory here. The fact that it's on non-op status means you'll need to factor in getting it roadworthy again. However, these C20s are solid trucks, and the Camper Special package makes it more desirable for certain buyers. The description is pretty sparse, so you'll want to inspect everything thoroughly. Check the frame for rust, verify the engine and transmission condition, and make sure all those Camper Special components are still intact and functional. 17. Let me tell you about this 1961 Chevy C10 Apache I found on Craigslist. But I've got to be really honest here. The seller's description is incredibly sparse for a truck of this age and asking price. Listed at $10,900, and they're open to offers, we're looking at what's claimed to be a rust-free Apache with 28,000 miles showing. Now, on a 62-year-old truck, you'll definitely want to verify that mileage number. It's likely rolled over at least once. The seller mentions lots of new parts, but doesn't specify what those parts are, which is a bit concerning. For a truck this age, buyers really need to know what's been replaced or restored. These early 60s Apaches are beautiful trucks when done right, but they can also hide a lot of issues under pretty paint. The claim of being rust-free is significant if true. These trucks were notorious for rust in the cab corners, floor pans, and bed. You'll definitely want to verify this claim thoroughly with a close inspection. At $10,900, we're in the middle range for these trucks. Not project car pricing, but not fully restored pricing either. The automatic transmission is a nice feature for drivability, but again, we don't know its condition or if it's been rebuilt. Look, these 61 Apaches are becoming increasingly collectible, and they're gorgeous pieces of American truck history. However, with such a brief description, you'll want to do some serious due diligence before pulling the trigger. Check all the usual rust spots, verify the mechanical condition, and maybe try to get more information about those new parts. 18. Let me tell you about this interesting 1967 El Camino Malibu that just popped up on Craigslist. This one's got some really cool features, but also some current issues we need to discuss. Listed at $13,300, we're looking at what appears to be a pretty original example with some desirable specs. It's running a 327 V8 with 202 high-performance heads, paired with a factory Muncie M21 4-speed manual and a stout 12-bolt rear end. That's a sweet drivetrain combination. The seller claims these are numbers-matching components, which, if verified, adds significant value. The odometer shows 54,000 miles, and interestingly, the seller has documentation from the Oregon title supporting these as actual miles. That's pretty rare for a 56-year-old vehicle. Now let's be completely honest about the current situation. This El Camino isn't running right now. The seller's being upfront about an electrical issue that's preventing it from starting. It seems to be related to the ignition switch or the firewall bulkhead connection. And there's also an aftermarket Mallory electronic ignition in the mix that could be part of the problem. The body is described as straight, but not perfect, and the interior is clean. This suggests it's a solid driver-quality vehicle that needs some attention rather than a show car. At $13,300, considering the current non-running status, you're buying a project, but one with some really desirable features. That M21/327/12-bolt combination is worth some serious money if numbers matching. The electrical issues described are fairly common in these old GMs and typically fixable without major expense. 19. Let's talk about this 1983 Dodge Ram 4X4 I found on Craigslist. I've got to say the seller's description is pretty minimal, but there are some interesting points to discuss. Listed at $6,200, we're looking at a classic Ram with the reliable 318 V8 paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. That's a pretty fun combination in these old trucks. The 4X4 system adds capability, though you'll definitely want to check its condition since we don't get any details about its functionality. The seller mentions some recent work, new brakes, tires, and a tune-up, which is good to hear. They describe it as a good driver, suggesting it's a usable truck rather than a showpiece. The odometer has rolled over, which is pretty common for these old workhorses, so actual mileage is unknown. Now I've got to be honest here, the description is incredibly brief for a truck of this age. These early 80s Rams are known for rust issues, particularly in the cab corners, floor pans, and bed mounts. but we get no information about the body condition beyond the white paint color. At $6,200, you're in the middle range for these trucks. Not project car pricing, but not fully restored pricing either. The manual transmission and 4x4 combination does make it more desirable, and that 318 V8 is known for being pretty bulletproof when maintained. This could be a decent work truck or weekend warrior if everything checks out. Just make sure to thoroughly inspect all the usual rust spots, verify the 4x4 system works properly, and check that the recent maintenance was done correctly. The price might be negotiable given the sparse description. 20. Let me tell you about this 1981 Ford F-250 Ranger I found on Craigslist. I've got to be really honest here. There are some good points and some serious red flags we need to discuss. Listed at $2,500, we're looking at an extended cab, long bed with the 400M engine paired with a 5-speed manual. That's actually a pretty cool drivetrain combo. The dual tanks are both working, which is nice for range, and they've been cleaned and had new senders installed. Now, let's address the elephants in the room. First, this truck has a missing title. That's a major issue that could be a real headache depending on your state's laws. Second, the condition is listed as fair, and the odometer's rolled over past 150,000 miles. The seller's being pretty transparent about the truck's condition, even mentioning a previously missing marker light that's been replaced. The brown paint probably isn't winning any beauty contests, but these old work trucks weren't about looks anyway. At $2,500, you're definitely in project truck territory here. The missing title is the biggest concern. You'll need to factor in the time and cost of sorting that out. However, if you can get past the title issue, you're getting a lot of recent mechanical work for the money.